right, this is my tier list coming up for April 2023, and this is mostly just my experience with playing in Infinite since the balance changes. There are some newcomers here, and there are some decks that are definitely on the rise. However, without a doubt, the most dominant deck right now in Marvel Snap, and there really is no question, is still Shuri. And I have to say, I'm a little bit disappointed about this because we're pretty close to having a season reset, and I'll be making my climb to Infinite again. And it will be for 3 seasons in a row that the best deck is Shuri. I climbed with Shuri 2 seasons ago in 3 days to Infinite, and then last season in 7 days. And if this is still the best deck, I don't know. So I think there needs to be some more balance adjustments, maybe to Red Skull. Largely, the deck has a core group of cards. There's Sunspot, Zero, Titania Armor, Lizard, Cosmo, Shuri, Taskmaster, Red Skull, and She-Hulk are all pretty much must-haves. The 2 slots on this deck that are interchangeable are going to be Maximus and Captain Marvel, and people will often put Polaris or Arrow, or even Arnim Zola. So any one of those 5 cards in those 2 slots, you know, the 5 cards being Maximus, Captain Marvel, Arrow, Polaris, or Arnim Zola can be substituted in, and the deck works very well. A couple things about playing the deck. With Shuri, you probably want to snap before you play Shuri if you have a good line. If you're unable to zero out Titania, you want to save her for turn 6 and play her on turn 6, especially if you do not have priority. It can be a little bit tricky. The other thing to note is if you have a combo with She-Hulk and a 5-cost card, which could be Taskmaster, Captain Marvel, Red Skull, you typically want to skip turn 5, soak up Sunspot, so you get 5 power there, and then on the last turn play She-Hulk, Taskmaster, you know, especially if you played Shuri on turn 4, skip turn 5, play a 20 power or an 18 power She-Hulk, and then a 18 power Taskmaster, all on turn 6. So it's a pretty straightforward deck. I feel like there are people in the community that are kind of over it. It's been here for a minute, and I think there's also a lot of people that did not get the balance changes that they wanted for Shuri. I do like this deck. I mean, it was one of the main decks that I played. I mean, I'm known for being a Shuri player, but I'm ready to move on and let somebody else shine, which is it's gonna move on into the next most exciting deck that has popped up since the balance changes, and that is going to be Sarah Control. Now, there are 3 different versions of this deck that we're going to go over. This is the baseline Sarah Control. And the nice thing about this deck is that, you know, if you have Sarah, most people can build this deck. I mean, Mysterio can be swapped out with any other good 2-drop, maybe like Scorpion, or you could also put in like Polaris or Maximus in place of Mysterio. But I feel like a lot of people can build this deck. And again, you want to hold on to Nova to late. You want to hold on to Scarlet Witch to the end to have a surprise a moment. You want to save your Killmonger and Shang-Chi and Enchantress. And the idea is to snap before you play Sarah on turn 5 and then drop all your cards and wreck nerds. There's a couple key cards that are in all of the Sarah decks because we're going to go over a couple different versions. They all pretty much run Nova. They all pretty much run Scarlet Witch. They all pretty much run Killmonger, Shang-Chi, and Enchantress. So if you're playing against a Sarah deck, keep in mind that all of those cards are going to be a thing for sure. So next, we're going to talk about 2 other builds that I think are significantly different. But I think this is a top tier deck, and it can hang with all the decks right now. I've actually been having the most fun with Sarah. Like when I start my stream, I want to play a Sarah deck. I have a lot of fun with Sarah. And also, if you're playing against a Sarah deck and they drop Sarah on turn 5, get ready. It's going to happen on turn 6. All right, so this is a Zabu Darkhawk version of the deck, which is very explosive and puts out a lot of power with Darkhawk and Rock Slide, taking advantage of Zabu. And so when you have Zabu and Sarah, you can dump a ton of cards. And then there is a Toxic Sarah version of the deck. Now, this one I have played the most, and this one I enjoy playing more than the other two, mostly because it runs Luke Cage. And there are so many cool things you can do with Luke Cage and locations and how it messes up Valkyrie. And then you've got some significant power output from Typhoid Mary, which has some, of course, negative effects, which can be offset by Luke Cage. Again, you want to save Nova and the Killmonger and the Polaris and the Shang-Chi and the Enchantress and the Scarlet Witch for turn 6 and the Hazmat for turn 6, because you want to surprise them and steal them. Like, you don't want to play like Nova and Scarlet Witch necessarily on curve. I mean, if you can use your Scarlet Witch to destroy a location that they're counting on and they're using the points from it or something like that. I mean, it's very situational, but the ability to just like change everything up on turn 6 is highly fascinating. And I personally just love all 3 of these Sarah decks. And as far as like ranking, I still think Shuri's the best deck in the game. And then there is Sarah beneath Shuri. And then from there, we've got a lot of other decks. So we're going to kind of like which one of these other decks are better or worse. I'll let you decide. But we've got 6 other decks we're going to talk about in this video. But in my opinion, the best 2 archetypes right now are going to be Shuri and Sarah. And I think Shuri is the best. So we've got Thanos. Now, the one thing I can say about Thanos is Thanos was hit pretty hard by the balance adjustments. And I personally have not been playing a lot against a lot of Leech as much anymore, which has been, great. Like, I think I was really frustrated with Leech, but I just don't come across Leech as much. The nerfs to the way that Quinjet works, the nerfs to the way that the Space Stone works, really impacted people wanting to play this deck and how it works with Lockjaw. But this is the best version of the Thanos deck. It is still competitive. It still gets wins. It still just does fine. Has it been knocked down a notch? For sure. I personally feel that the Shuri and the Sarah decks are quite a bit better than the Thanos decks, but that's just my opinion. I also feel the same way about Galactus. And Galactus is a very polarizing deck. I think everybody understands how polarizing Galactus is. I mean, it has a linear gameplay. I guess Shuri has linear gameplay as well. The other thing I wanted to say is that, if you're thinking about getting a Galactus or Thanos, you can make Thanos work with an ongoing deck list and a lot of pool 2 cards. Galactus requires a lot of pool 3 cards to get up and running. Specifically, most of this deck list is very rigid, Electro Wave. I feel like you need Shang-Chi, Doc Ock, Null, Galactus, Destroyer, and Death. Chavez makes the deck more consistent. Psylocke makes the deck more consistent. Yondu fuels the Null. But you can remove Yondu. You can remove Cloak if you wanted to and do something different. But this build right here also runs Cloak, which helps mitigate locations so that you can actually play Galactus into his own lane. Like if you got some pesky squirrels or something in there. I personally also have ran Daredevil, and I like Daredevil as much as Cloak. Let's go on to the next deck. The deck has Darkhawk, Devil Dino. So this is a viable deck. I actually thought this was going to come and be right underneath Shuri, but Sarah Control has filled that spot. This is still a very viable deck. Absolutely pushes out a lot of power. So you get to make use of Quinjet with Moon Girl. Also, there's synergy with White Queen with Quinjet, and then it does run the Dark Hawk package, which includes Korg and Rock Slide. There's also amazing synergy there with Devil Dinosaur, with Sentinel, Agent Coulson, and Moon Girl. And then your Mystique can copy a whole bunch of things. Hopefully you're able to get multiple copies of Mystique with with Moon Girl, and then you can copy the ongoing effects of either Dark Hawk or Devil Dino. It's a very explosive deck and puts out a lot of power. This is another deck that is a new deck to my list, and it was a lot of fun to play. And so it's kind of a variation of Death Wave, only it's called Doom Wave. And the idea here is to play Wave on turn 5, soak 2 energy into Sunspot, and then have She-Hulk costing 2, and then you could play either Arrow or Doctor Doom or America Chavez in addition to She-Hulk on turn 6. It's pretty much just a good cards deck list. It does very well, and I feel like Doom is the new superstar in this current meta. I see Doom everywhere, and then there is the traditional Death Wave package, which is very similar, and it's a similar strategy, but the idea here is that in the early game, you're trying to blow up as many cards as possible, either using Bucky, Yondu, the Hood with Killmonger, Squirrel Girl. You're just exploding the squirrels with Killmonger. And then you play Death Wave, you play Wave on turn 5, and then you float 2 energy, which then makes that you have potentially a 2-cost She-Hulk, and then you have Death for free, and then you could also run Arrow or Shang-Chi. So this is kind of an older build. This has been around for a long time, and it is still very viable. Now, there's a couple decks that I just wanted to have honorable mentions that I may not talk about. There's Electro Ramp, there's Bounce, there's Patriot, there's Cerebro, and I think all of those decks are good, and I think they can actually do well with a highly skilled player. 2 of decks that kind of have surprised me and you might want to try out. I don't think they're as good as the other decks we've been talking about, but Discard still has a place in the game. And this is just a standard discard build. Something that is kind of interesting / annoying, if you ask me, is that Sunspot is such a good card that is used even in this build over Blade, right? Sunspot's everywhere. I think Sunspot is in 46% of all the decks, and it's just kind of I love Sunspot. He's one of my favorite cards. I think most of the decks that I've shown today have Sunspot in there. It's just interesting to me that an optimal discard build runs Sunspot over Blade. I feel that speaks to either Blade needing a buff, or that it also speaks to the fact that maybe Sunspot is just too good. And then the last deck that I will show here is an on reveal. This deck is easily disrupted, but if your opponent is not playing disruption like Cosmo or something like that, but you lock up a lane with Storm, and then you're able to cheat power into that lane with either White Tiger or Doctor Doom. Lots of opportunities to have a lot of power, but this is pretty much just your typical Wong Odin, and it does very well. All right, what do you think the best decks are? Are you happy with the current meta? I personally am pretty excited that we have more options, but it's still overshadowed by the dominance of Shuri. But overall, I've been having a ton of fun playing this meta, specifically with Sarah decks. I love Sarah decks. Let me know what you think in the comment section. As always, thanks for watching and keep on gaming. Bye for now.